just loved it. So she will look, and I mean, she could change her looks every day.
Les, from a police point of view, how does that make it difficult for someone whose perception of reality is challenged and they change their looks? They may not, as your partner said, may not be aware of who they are.
Well, that is challenging, especially if they're presenting themselves as a different person. But like, once again, we go back to perhaps hospital records, because Tasha would need her medication. And if something bad happened to her, she would have to go to a hospital if she had some kind of accident or something like that. If we could get a hold of those records on a more consistent basis, then we could look at that. And the same thing with that tattoo of a nurse as seen her or a doctor as seen her, and maybe she's not Tasha, maybe somebody else. Maybe somebody say, well, you know what, I had a girl named Jen with this tattoo, maybe that's Tasha.
Lindy, can you tell me a little bit about the things that you and Tasha's father have done to try to find her? Because you've done a lot.
We did a lot because she'd been in the hospital in London. She knew some of the patients were from Woodstock. She's from North Bay. She's lived here in Kitchener. She lived in Cambridge, so where do you look? Where, honestly, do you look? I've been down the streets of Toronto, North Bay, London. I've called every food bank, and it gets to a point where you don't, she could be a block ahead of you or a block behind you. Toronto's a big city. And I had to, you have to step back for a while and focus your energies somewhere. For me, it was taking a look at how my case was being presented, how the police were dealing with it, which in the beginning wasn't well, at least. And so I funneled everything into Music for the Missing because you're numb and you're alone. And if it's just you and your husband walking the streets with your family and friends, you still don't know what to do next. So I created Music for the Missing to bring everybody together. But it also gave us a springboard for more ideas. And with Tasha, with my case not being handled the way I felt should be handled, it now gives us a better understanding of where to go with the Waterloo Regional, because I believe that we're working with 3 of the best. But it gives us a firm understanding of where we can go and what changes we can do within the police department itself for the next family. Nobody should have to go through what I went through. Nobody.
Well, just a last thing, Lindy. I want to ask you about something you raised before the show, about this idea that you'd like the public to maybe take a second look when they pass along the
absolutely.
street. Can you tell us about that?
Because before Tasha went missing, I'd read about a missing family in the newspaper, and I'd say, oh, that poor family, and I'd turn the page. We all do it. You'd buy a cup of coffee. Do you look at that person that you're buying the cup of coffee from? If I asked you tonight who served you this morning, could you tell me? You walk down the street in Toronto, and people are really disrespectful. That is somebody's loved one. I don't care if you've, done anything illegal. I don't care if you've done drugs. Somebody loves you. And this is what people have to remember. It's a whole respect thing. I don't care. It's somebody's child. It's somebody's loved one. And that's what we need to think about when we see somebody on the street. Are they missing?
Well, we'll have to leave it at that.
Absolutely.
Lindy, we really appreciate you coming on to
No
talk to us.
problem.
We'll be back after the break. We're back and you're watching Talk Local on Rogers TV. We're going to end tonight's show talking about missing people by looking at the case of Sandy Apt, who vanished under suspicious circumstances from his trailer in Puzzlage in 2008. And remember, we always want to hear from you about what you're hearing on the show, and we'll get you some contacts in a minute. But I do want to bring in Sandy's sister, Jackie House. Thanks for coming on, Jackie.
Thanks for having us.
I'll ask right off the bat, what do you think happened to your brother?
I honestly believe that he has been murdered. A lot of things kind of led up to he had gone to jail a few years back for dealing cocaine, and he had been extorted, I feel, for, like there's a lot of proof and things, somewhat. And I just know he wouldn't have disappeared. I know for sure that he's definitely been killed.
Why do you think that someone would want to kill him?
Well, there was a lot of the situation with him before he went to jail, and doing a lot of selling a lot of the drugs and stuff. When the police raided him, busted everybody, he still had that amount that the police took, and rather than being that rat and whatnot, he decided to just take the whole thing for it, and he still had to pay somebody for all that went missing from the police and whatnot. So they basically made him pay for the product that he didn't even have, that it was in police custody.
Okay, I want to bring in Sergeant Richard Dorling from the Waterloo Regional Police. You've spent a lot of time on this case, as has Les Pike, detective. We don't believe that Sandy has just gone into hiding. There's a belief that he was met with foul play. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jackie summarized it quite well. A lot of things point to the fact that he was involved in crime, obviously, got himself into some debt, was paying off his debt. At some point, I think somebody made him pay for his debt, pay with his life.
Over and over.
It certainly could be the case where, you beat somebody up and all of a sudden they happen to die from their injuries. People panic. What do you do? Well, unfortunately, people make the choice to, say, dispose of a body or put someone where they're not going to be found. Unfortunately, we believe that is quite possibly the case of Sandy.
I want to bring in Detective Les Pike. There was, a few years ago, a moment where you thought you may have found Sandy. Can you tell us about that?
That's correct. Back in 2010, there were some found remains located on Greenhouse Road. And actually, that's where I met Jackie. Jackie actually drove out and had heard it on the news and spoke to me about Sandy. And I'm sure we'll speak about that before, but that's what these families go through when found remains come up. Right away, they think, is it my loved one? Everything fit in regards to the Sandy Apt investigation, to the location, circumstances, and I was not 100% sure, but I was quite certain that DNA would match with the found remains with Sandy. However, that wasn't the case. It wasn't Sandy. It turned out to be a different person. But once again, that's the kind of thing that these families go through, and you try not to get the family hopes up, and I was quite honest with Jackie with what we were dealing with, but deep inside I was saying, well, I think it's him, and it turned out it wasn't.
And Richard, you've talked about this idea of trying to get families off that roller coaster. What kinds of things are you talking about?
Well, it's a personal goal of mine that when remains are found throughout the province, that we can have the answers to give to the families before they have to call us. We can't stop the roller coaster and control people's emotions, and there will always be concerned or alerted to these issues, but we're trying to get all the dental and DNA to get the match made as quickly as possible to either prove or disprove, so that families don't have to go through this, and they have some faith in us that we're going to do that, and as soon as we have something that we can offer them, we will call right away.
Jackie, I want to learn a little more about your brother. Yes, he was a man whose drug debts had kind of taken over his life, but he was more than that, and you've talked about that. Tell us who he was.
He was an amazing, he could do amazing auto body and paint. He was a phenomenal artist. He had a great big heart. He used to take my daughter to chapters and things. They'd read together. Growing up, he was dyslexic, so he kind of taught himself how to overcome that, and that was just him. Any challenge, he would take it. My daughter and I and him would go camping we'd take a few days, we'd go away. He was just, you would just never expect. You see the pictures, the tattoos, and the hair and stuff, and you'd think he's some mean guy, but he was really good, and he would give you anything.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they took so much from him that he became a shell of a person by the end. There was just nothing there.
What would it mean to you to have an answer?
Well, I mean, I won't stop. You know, if there was an answer, I know I would still be listening for all these other families out here too. But just, I mean, I just need to know something. I mean, I know like what things he did were wrong. They were not worth his life. And I just the knowing, I think, it'll always haunt me, even when I do know, I think. But now it's just, I mean, you go out there and you hear things, so then you check it out and you drive out there yourself and try to find out all those questions. And they've been awesome with, I can call them or text them at any time because I think I hear something or know something. And because a lot of times it's hard for the police to find that out.
I wish we had more time. We're going to leave it at that. But Jackie, thanks so much for coming on. For Richard and Les, we really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
That's all the time we have for tonight's show, folks. But remember, if you know anything about these cases we've been talking about tonight, you can always call Crime Stoppers anonymously at 1-800-222-8477 or Waterloo Regional Police at 519-650-8500, extension 8655. And we also want to hear from you about what you're hearing on the show. You can tweet us at TalkLocal at Waterloo at WR. We'll be right back.